Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and I'm going to tell you right off the bat what we're doing so you can start dialing the phone. It's a kids open forum today. So if you are a kid, if you're a parent of a kid who'd like to ask a question, 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. If your arrangement with your parents is you got to ask permission before you call people, then ask permission first. Otherwise, 888-318-7884. Our guest this hour, Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author most recently of Teaching with Authority. Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I am well. I feel recovered from the wild pledge drive days.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, but we don't.
So yesterday we made our second hour goal.
Oh,
Of the
I'm glad you remembered to tell
$15,000.
people.
Yeah. Also, we made as of this morning, we made it to about 80% of our overall drive goal. So that's okay.
Yeah. And thanks for your patience while we did that, and thanks for all of you who responded with your prayers or your financial help. We don't really know the final stuff for a little while because there's different ways people get to us, and Darren will get it all tabulated next week, I suppose, or it sometimes takes even longer than that. But thus far, we have every reason to be grateful to you for your help and support. Again, it is Kids Open Forum, the first hour. Second hour, Carlo Broussard will be here. We're going to talk about the whys of Catholic belief. This hour, if you're...
Because
we're just going to say because.
No,
Carlo,
we can go
why
into
do we,
more depth than
I guess,
that.
yeah, but every answer is going to start with the word because. I hadn't thought
Better,
about that.
yeah.
Kids Open Forum this hour. I went right off the bat to tell people it was Kids Open Forum because usually it takes people a little while to get their mom or dad to let them call. Look at that, Jimmy. Already loads
how
of
about
calls.
that?
I think
Yeah,
maybe we should
still
go
a
to
few
calls.
lines open.
Yeah, there are lines open if you are of the younger set and you'd like to ask a question of Jimmy Akin. 888-318-7884. I think we start with Cece in Cleveland, Ohio. Cece, are you there? Hi, Cece.
Hi.
How old are you, Cece?
I'm 8.
Well, thank you for calling, Cece. What's your question for Jimmy?
Why did God create plants and animals if they can't think or love?
Well, being able to think and love are two things that are cool, but they're not the only things that are cool. And every creature that God makes, whether it's able to think like a human being or whether it's able to feel like an animal or even if it's just able to grow like a plant, it has something that's cool about it. In fact, it has many things that are cool about it, many things that are good about it. And so even though they aren't able to think about God or reflect on God the way we can, plants and animals nevertheless display God's own goodness. They display his creative ability and how he can come up with all these different things and all these different kinds of goodness that they have. You know, some of them are very strong, some of them are very beautiful, some of them are very dynamic, very energetic. They run around and they do stuff. And so it's just a way of God showing his creativity, just like when a person makes a painting or a drawing. The painting or drawing can't think, but it does show the creativity of the person who paints it or draws it, and it also is beautiful in and of itself. It has good things about it, and so all of God's creations have good things about them, and also he created them because we need them too. He made us so that we need to eat plants and animals, for example. And so one of the reasons they exist is not only because they're good in and of themselves, but also because they serve our needs. And so God was helping us out.
How's that, Cece?
Good.
That makes sense to you?
Thank you. And also,
Mm-hmm.
my dad, my sister, and I love to listen to your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, man, you are making us happy today, Cece. I just want to follow up for a second because we happen to have a guest in the studio today who is a wildlife biologist. So I'm going to ask him, do animals like being animals in your experience? That's an actual scientist just confirmed.
they
Animals
wouldn't-
like being animals.
They wouldn't choose to be anything else.
Cece, thank you so much for your call, and tell your dad thanks for putting on the podcast.
See how young people know about podcasts.
I know old people don't always, but young people do. Lucy in Cleveland, Ohio, you are next. Are you there with us, Lucy?
Yes,
And how old are you, Lucy?
6.
Oh, well, thank you for calling, Lucy. What is your question for Jimmy?
How can God hear you when you pray?
Well, since we're human beings, we have ears that enable us to hear, and that's the way we get information most of the time about what other people are asking us or talking to us about, is we get it through our hearing. It is possible to get it through our eyes also, like when people who are mute speak in sign language, and we can learn about what they're saying to us through their eyes, through our eyes, I should say, or if they write it down for us on a piece of paper or send us an email or something like that, then we also know what people are saying to us. But we only need to use our eyes or our ears or even sometimes our hands, because Helen Keller was both deaf and blind,
And she could
talk to people by feeling what their hands were doing
Yeah.
with sign language. So we have to use our senses like hearing and vision and touch in order to know what people are saying to us. But God doesn't have the limitations that we do. He doesn't have a body, and he consequently isn't dependent on physical senses the way we are. Instead, God has a special ability to just know everything that can be known. And consequently, there's a fancy word for the kind of knowledge God has. We say God is omniscient. That means he knows everything. And so as a result of knowing everything, God just automatically knows what we are saying to him, even though he doesn't have ears apart from Jesus in the incarnation. And so he doesn't need to hear us or see us or feel us with physical senses. He just automatically knows everything that's true because he's omniscient.
Lucy, does that make sense to you?
Yes. Thank you, Jenny Aiken.
Thank you, Lucy.
Lucy, you're all right. Thanks for that call. The number here is 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. It is a kids open forum today. If you are a kid or you have a kid who's got a question, something they'd like answered about the Catholic Church, about God, about sacraments, about
The Bible?
pretty much the Bible, yeah, or
Canon law,
a moral question, maybe.
liturgy,
Yeah, wow, we could go on and on.
comic book history.
You'll take questions
Oh,
about
of
comic book
course.
history? All right, fair enough.
We've got a bunch of lines open now, too.
888-318-7884 is that number. It's 20 Answers Challenge time. Hundreds of people have already signed up. Are you going to be joining us this year? Here's how it works. When you purchase the sampler of all 32 books in the series, you save 60% off. So you get the whole set of 32, 60% off. And then we challenge you to finish them all through Lent and the Easter season. Lent begins March 6th, and the Easter season ends, 2 or 3 months after that.
Mm-hmm.
I've never counted the days, but you've got months to read these 32 books. And then we're going to give you free shipping on this within the continental United States. That's 60% off every set you purchase, plus free shipping. Take the
So let's do a little math on the air.
Yes.
So Lent is 46 days long, even though we normally say it's 40.
46.
And the Easter season, which
it's
goes through Pentecost, is 50. So that means you've got 96 days to read 32 books. So that's like a book every 3 days. And since
they're just 20 answers.
They're just 20 answers.
So
that would be 6.67 answers per day, and that's easily doable.
So just 6.67 answers a day in the 20 Answers Challenge. And you get 60% savings and free shipping on the whole set. Go to shop.catholic.com to get yours today.
Every question is important. Ask yours today on Catholic Answers Live.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour. Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, and the topic is whatever is on your mind, as long as you're like, well, I don't know, 15 or under or something. I don't think we have a hard break, but something like that.
18 or under.
18 or under?
Yeah.
Really? All right.
Well, we need calls right now, so
okay.
May as well be generous.
Or if you can pretend to be a child. It's Kids Open Forum. Any question at all is welcome from any kid at all. You just dial 888-318-7884, and you'll get right in here to assistant producer Marie. She'll put you on the air with us, 888-318-7884. Let's go to Catherine in Nevada. Hi, Catherine. Are you there?
Yeah,
And how old are you, Catherine?
7.
Well, thank you very much for calling us, Catherine. What is your question for Jimmy?
Will you know God if you're in hell?
Well, from what we're given to understand in the Bible, the answer seems to be yes, that you do at least know about God if you're in hell. We see an example of that in Jesus' parable of Lazarus and the rich man in the Gospel of Luke. In that parable, the rich man dies and goes to hell, and he is in hell, and he's aware not just of himself, but also aware of Abraham and aware of Lazarus, who's gone to be with Abraham. And he asks Abraham to send Lazarus back from the dead to tell his brothers that they need to repent, that they need to stop sinning and get right with God so that they don't go to hell too. And that indicates that he has his memories of the things he knew in his life, including knowing about God, and he still knows his brothers. He still knows that his brothers are sinning and they need to stop doing that. And so he does have a knowledge of God even though he's in hell. But what he doesn't have is the kind of intimate, loving knowledge of God that Abraham or Lazarus or all of the people who are saved will have.
Does that work okay for you? Does that make sense to you, Catherine?
Yeah.
Well, Catherine, thank you very, very much for that call.
Thank you, too.
Okay. Bye-bye, Catherine. It is Kids Open Forum today. If you're a kid, your call is welcome, no matter what the question. And let me give you that number again in case you're thinking you want to dial 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Jack in Omaha, Nebraska, you are up next. Are you there with us, Jack?
Yep.
And how old are you, Jack?
10.
And have you ever called us before, Jack?
Nope.
Well, we're very happy to get your call. What is your question for Jimmy?
If God intended the world to be peaceful, how come he gave the humans the ability to stab at one another with swords and all the weapons? Like, for example, if he wanted the whole world to be Catholic and he wanted it to be peaceful, how come he gave the people the ability to turn away from him in religion and to manufacture weapons?
That is
Okay.
an excellent question, Jack. A couple questions. Thank you very much.
So, Jack, people who've studied this question have a special name for it. They call it the problem of evil. Why does a good God allow evil in the world? And the answer is that even though God wants people to do good, He wants them to be Catholic, He wants them to be peaceful, He wants them not to be robots. He doesn't just want them to be programmed to be Catholic or to be peaceful. He wants them to freely choose to love Him and love other people. And because if you don't have the ability to freely choose, then you're just a robot. And robots don't really love. They may act like they love, but they don't really love. And so consequently, in this life, God wanted us not only to do good things, He wanted us to freely choose to do good things. And so He gave us a gift called free will that allows us to be able to make free choices where we're not compelled to do one thing or another. And consequently, we can freely choose to do good, or we can freely choose to do evil. And God values free will enough that He not only gave us free will, He gave angels free will too, so they could either freely choose to love Him or not. That's why there are some good angels and some bad angels. It's why there are some good people and some bad people. And ultimately, He will use even people's evil choices to bring about a greater good. For example, Jack, you know what happened to Jesus when He died on the cross, right? That was something that was evil. That was something that the devil had Judas Iscariot betray Jesus so that He would go to the cross. But did God bring something good out of Jesus' death? Jack, what do you think?
Jack? Oh, I'm sorry, Jack.
Oh, so I need to get you back on the air. Did anything good happen out of Jesus' death?
Yeah, he died for our sins.
Right. So that's an example of how God can bring good even out of evil. And so one of the things that our faith teaches is that God did want to give people a free choice between good and evil, and that's why He allows evil, but He will ultimately bring good out of every single evil, just like He brought good out of the death of Jesus. And so even when someone does something bad, like they leave the Catholic Church or they stab someone or attack somebody, then God will nevertheless bring good out of that. And so even if we suffer because of what something that someone has done that is bad to us, like maybe someone stabs us, God can still give us eternal happiness, and He will as long as we choose God. And so we don't have to worry that we will end up losing out on anything important, because God will ultimately bring good out of everything bad that happens, including He'll bring about good for us.
Jack, thank you very, very much for your call.
Okay, yep.
Okay, call again. Let's see. Now we go to Maya in North Dakota. Maya, are you there with us?
Yes.
Hi, Maya. How old are you?
10.
And your question for Jimmy Akin?
I don't understand that the Holy Spirit, God, and Jesus are all one person.
Okay, well, actually, they're not one person. They're three persons. The Father is one person, Jesus is one person, and the Holy Spirit is one person. What they are one is one being, or one God in this case. And that raises a question of how can a single being be three persons? And this is a little hard for us to understand because our ability to imagine things is limited by what we've experienced. You see that, for example, like in fantasy books or fantasy
Yeah.
TV shows. You may see like a unicorn or something. Well, it's a horse with a horn. Well, that's because we've seen horses before and we've seen horns before. And so we can put them together in our imagination and imagine a horse with a horn, and we call it a unicorn. So we can imagine things like unicorns, but it's really hard to imagine things that we've never ever seen before. And an example of that is like in science fiction. You notice aliens in science fiction always look like something we've seen before, like Mr. Spock. He's a human, but he's got pointed ears.
Yeah.
Because that's easy for us to imagine. But something that doesn't look like anything else on Earth, anything we've never seen before, that's really hard to imagine. And because God is infinitely above us and he doesn't have a body and he lives in heaven, he's outside of anything we've ever seen, and that makes it hard for us to imagine what God is like. But we can at least understand how God can be a single being, but also three persons. And we can understand that by thinking about what's the nature of a being. Ultimately, a being is anything that bees. Anything that exists is a being. So I'm a being. You, Maya, are a being. The telephone that you're talking to me on is a being. A rock is a being. A snowflake is a being. So anything that is real, anything that exists is a being. But you'll notice some beings are zero persons, like a rock or a snowflake or a phone. Those beings are zero persons. So if you have a phone, you have one being, but it's zero persons. On the other hand, some beings like you and me, Maya, we're each one being. I'm one being, I exist. You're one being, you exist. But each of us is one person. I'm one person and you're one person. And so if you can have some beings that are zero persons and some beings that are one person, then being and person are two different things. They're two different categories. And so if you can have some beings that are zero persons and some beings that are one person, then you can also have some beings that are more than one person. And God is a being who is more than one person. It's hard to understand that because it's outside of our experience. We don't have any beings here on earth who are more than one person, but we can see how it's possible by comparing God to beings that we do have here on earth, like you and me, who are one person, or snowflakes or rocks, who are zero persons. That makes it possible for there to be beings who are more than one person.
That is a really hard question you asked, Maya. Did Jimmy help you with it?
Yes.
All right. Is it cold there in North Dakota today?
Yes, very cold.
I think it's cold in North Dakota most of the time.
Yeah, well, they have warm summers. You have warm summers, right?
I said
Maya?
most.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes. Okay, fair enough. Maya, thank you very, very much. You challenged us with a very tough question. Really appreciate it. And call back anytime. We'd love to answer your question any day. It is Kids Open Forum today. If you're a kid and you've got a question about the Catholic Church, about Catholic beliefs, about religion, about God, whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to call. Just check with who's ever in charge of the phone and make sure you have permission, and then dial 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Let us go to Shayla in Marshall, Missouri. Are you there, Shayla? Shayla?
Yes.
Oh, and how old are you?
I'm here.
How old are you, Shayla?
I'm 13.
Well, thank you for calling. Your question for Jimmy. Your question?
Yes. How do you respond to someone who says that God couldn't have created the universe because the Big Bang Theory did that?
Well, I would say a couple of things. The first one is that just because we have good evidence that the Big Bang happened, that doesn't tell us anything about what caused the Big Bang. You still need something to explain the Big Bang. There's an argument that sometimes people make for God's existence, and you're a little older, so I'll tell you the name of it because it's got a funny name. It's called the Kalam argument, K-A-L-A-A-M. And the argument goes that anything that has a beginning needs to have a cause. And since our universe had a beginning, whether it was the Big Bang or something even earlier than the Big Bang, our universe needs a cause. And that cause is God, according to the Christian faith. And God himself doesn't have a beginning because he's outside of time, so he doesn't need a cause. So even though you have our universe which has a beginning, it still needs a cause, and we propose as Christians that that cause is God. And we have other evidence to show that God has appeared to us in Jesus Christ and so forth. But even if someone says, well, the universe began in a Big Bang, great. That just means God is the cause of the Big Bang. Also, you know who proposed the idea of the Big Bang? It was a Catholic priest named Father George Lemaitre. So Catholics have no problem with the Big Bang.
Shayla, your question is really important to a lot of 13-year-olds, so I hope you'll stay on the line and we'll get your response to what Jimmy had to say right after this. It's Kids Open Forum today, Catholic Answers Live.
This is Bishop Chad Zielinski from the Diocese of Fairbanks of Northern Alaska, and you are listening to Catholic Answers Live.
In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it is outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception, using scripture, papal and magisterial teaching, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine. Trent put forward a compelling case for Catholic teaching with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging onto the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old children or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture decays, we have to know how to talk to our children about these issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level to meet the world's challenges. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging onto the shop at Catholic.com.
Hi, this is Dr. David Anders. Do you have questions about the Catholic faith? Listen for the best of Called to Communion on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern and live on Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Called to Communion on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest this hour is Jimmy Akin, Senior Apologist at Catholic Answers. And it's Kids Open Forum. If you have a question, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Next hour, Carlo Broussard will be here. We're going to talk a bit about the whys of Catholic belief. Why do we believe the things that we believe? If you've got that kind of question, hang on for Carlo, and we'll take that question then. We left Shayla in Missouri on the line. Are you still there with us, Shayla?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to get your response to what Jimmy said, and I think you're speaking for a lot of people your age. There's all kinds of different things said about this. So did it make sense what Jimmy said, or do you need any kind of follow-up question?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Kind of, how would you explain that God if you have a person saying that it is Big Bang Theory and it wasn't God, how do you explain to that person that God could have created the Big Bang Theory if they're determined to believe that the Big Bang Theory was something on its own?
Yeah, well, I would start asking them questions, because normally in science we look for explanations. And so if they want to say the Big Bang just happened and didn't have a cause, then I would say, well, how is that a scientific belief? That sounds like a belief of faith to me, because you can't prove that it didn't have a cause. And normally in science, we look for causes. And so if you have an event like a star explodes and becomes a supernova, there's a cause for that. If you have an event like a life form arises on a planet, there's a cause for that. And it may be a natural cause. It may be a cause that's produced by the laws of physics or the laws of chemistry or something like that. But that only raises another question. Where did the laws of physics and chemistry come from? Ultimately, you need an explanation for these things, or as an act of faith, you need to say, oh, it just doesn't have a cause. It just is. And if someone is saying that, well, that may be their choice to believe that there is no explanation, but that's an act of faith on their part. That's not something they've proved. And so consequently, it's just as reasonable for you as a Christian to say, well, I think there is a cause. I think that there is an ultimate single cause behind everything that exists and that explains everything, and that cause is God, in my view. And so it's entirely appropriate for you to respond in that way. Also, I mentioned, but I went by it kind of quickly because we had to go to the break, but the Big Bang Theory actually was proposed by a Catholic priest. His name was Father George Lemaitre. And if you go to, say, Wikipedia and look up the Big Bang, you'll find a link to Father George Lemaitre's page on Wikipedia, and you can read about him. And you can tell your friend about him and say, look, Catholics don't have any problem with the idea that the Big Bang happened and that God was responsible for it. So that might give your friend a little bit of pause, because your friend may be assuming that, oh, well, religious believers don't have an answer to the Big Bang, or it's incompatible with belief in God to believe in the Big Bang. But it's not. In fact, the Big Bang itself was proposed by a religious believer.
Shayla, thank you very, very much for your call and for your follow-up question. And if you have more questions, Tuesdays and Thursdays are great days to call, and I hope you'll follow up, because I have a concern that sometimes people act as if, oh, these are impossible questions to answer, but they can be answered, and as they come up, we'd love to have your call. Okay, Shayla?
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Let us go now to Gabriella in Texas. Gabriella, are you there with us?
Yes.
Gabriella, how old are you?
11.
11. And what is your question, Gabriella?
My question is, why can't girls be priests?
Ultimately, the reason that women can't be priests is because Jesus set it up that way. That was a choice that Jesus made. In terms of why he made that choice, it's not because he doesn't value women just as much as he values men. He made both men and women, and so he values us both equally. But he also made us different. So men end up doing some things that more naturally, and women end up doing some things more naturally. And one of the things that's been pointed out is that women, unlike men, get to be mothers. They get to give physical life. No man is capable of doing that. A man may father a baby, but he doesn't get to carry the baby in his womb, and he doesn't get to give birth to the baby, and he doesn't get to nurse the baby, and he doesn't get to be a mother in that way and give physical life to another human being the way a woman can. And some people have said, well, maybe that's why then, since women get to give physical life to other people, maybe that's why God allowed men to be priests, so that even though they can't give physical life to people, they can give spiritual life to people in the form of the sacraments. And so that's just an idea that some people have proposed. It's not something that the church teaches, but it's an idea that's been proposed that does reflect the equality between men and women, that even though God loves us both equally, he gives us slightly different roles. And one of the roles that is natural for women to have is the ability to give physical life to another person in a special way. And maybe that's why God then has men able to be priests, so they can give spiritual life to someone in a special way.
Okay, Gabriella?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you very, very much for that call. Up next is Ella, also in Nebraska. Ella, are you there with us?
Yes.
And how old are you, Ella?
I'm 8.5.
8.5,
Boy,
awesome.
that's an age when halves are still important.
Yeah, that is a good age, 8.5. And so, Ella, what is your question?
How do priests, how do they know that Jesus is actually forgiving you when you're in confession?
Oh.
Well, they know it because of a couple of things. They know, for one, that Jesus wants to forgive people in confession, and that's why he told the disciples, whoever sins you forgive, they are forgiven, and whoever sins you retain, they are retained. So Jesus wanted his priests to either forgive the sins of someone in confession, or if the person didn't really repent, he wants them to retain those sins, to not forgive them. And you can read that if you want. That's in John chapter 20, in the Gospel of John chapter 20, if you want to read that. So a priest knows about John 20, and he knows Jesus wants them to either forgive the sin or not forgive it. And the question of whether they should do one or the other is answered by, is the person really sorry? Have they really repented of this sin? And so that's why if you go to confession and you tell a priest, I did this sin and I'm sorry for it and I want to not do it in the future, I want to get better, then the priest knows you've repented, and that gives him the ability to then do what Jesus said and forgive that sin in confession. On the other hand, if you go into confession and you say, I did this, but I don't really care about that. I'm not really sorry. I fully plan on doing this again, and I don't even want to get better. Well, then a priest would have to say, well, I'm sorry, but in that case, you haven't really repented, and so I can't absolve you. And so he would then do the other thing that Jesus said to do, which would be to retain a sin if the person is not really repentant of the sin.
How's that, Ella?
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. I appreciate that call. 888-318-7884 is our number here. 888-318-7884. It's Kids Open Forum this hour. We're happy to take calls on pretty much any religious topic. If you're a kid, go ahead and dial as long as you've got permission. Right now, I want to let you know we still have a brand new free ebook available. You go to Catholic Answers Facebook page, or you can go to shop.catholic.com. and download your free copy of Growing Closer to God, What is the Interior Life? That one's there to kind of help us get prepared for Lent. So if you would like that free ebook, go over to shop.catholic.com now, or visit the Catholic Answers Facebook page and get your free e-copy, e-edition of Growing Closer to God, What is the Interior Life?
Why do we need Catholic radio? Because not everybody's sitting in front of a computer or watching their television set at home. How about when driving to work? Catholic radio's there for you. I may be a Catholic priest, but I'm still a student of the faith, and Catholic radio helps supply good material, whether it be a question and answer format show, whether it be a show itself on doctrine or theology. I myself, as a priest, am always learning.
Father Wade thinks Catholic radio is important. So should you.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Next hour, Carla Broussard will be here. And all of our callers are from the younger set today because it is an open forum for kids today. Let's go to Sophia in New York. Sophia, are you there with us?
Yes.
And how old are you, Sophia?
8 years old.
And what is your question for Mr. Akin?
What if Mary said no to be the mother of God?
We don't know. God hasn't told us what would have happened if Mary had said no. It's possible that Jesus might not have been born. Although personally I kind of think that's unlikely. It's also possible that God might have had a backup plan, that if Mary said no, he might have chosen someone else and made the offer to someone else. That's also possible. It's even possible he could have had Jesus become a human without a mother if he wanted, because he's omnipotent and he can do that. He has all power. That's what omnipotent means. And so we don't really know exactly what would have happened because we're not told. God hasn't told us. But maybe in the next life we'll get to ask God what would have happened.
Okay, Sophia?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, too. We really appreciate your call, Sophia. Let's go to Daniel in Oregon. Daniel, are you there with us?
Yes. Yes.
And how old are you, Daniel?
13.
And what is your question for Mr. Akin?
How do we know that the angels exist?
We know that they exist, among other reasons, because God has revealed that to us. In the Bible, all the way from the very first book, Genesis, through the last book in the Bible, Revelation, the Bible acknowledges that angels exist. Now, in addition to the Bible, we also have the church fathers talking about angels, and periodically throughout history, God has allowed angels to appear to people and to do things. So we also have some knowledge of angels from private revelation. But the fundamental thing that tells us that angels exist is the fact that God has revealed it to us in his word.
Does that work for you, Daniel?
Yes. I have another question.
Okay. What's your other question?
Why are they pictured with wings?
This is something that is an interesting question. I know that that image is not one we find in the Bible. We do occasionally find angels depicted as having wings in the Bible, but they aren't just like humans with wings. And they don't just have two wings. So you'll find, like in the book of Ezekiel, we have some angels who are called cherubim. And a cherub has multiple wings and multiple heads, some of which don't look human. They have, in addition to like a human face, they also have a face like a lion and an eagle and an ox. So they're kind of a mixture of parts. In Isaiah, in the prophet Isaiah, he sees another group of angels called seraphim, and they have 6 wings. They fly using 2 of them. They cover their lower parts with 2 of them and their face with 2 of them to shield them from the glory of God. And so they're depicted as like humans with 6 wings, but we don't see the humans with 2 wings that we see in art a lot. We also see angels with no wings in Scripture, like when they appear at Jesus' tomb. They just look like men.
Yeah.
And so angels can appear different ways, and even these images that we see in Scripture are just meant to help us out. They really don't have bodies, and so they can appear any kind of different way, and these images are just to help us because we need a visual image in order to relate to. I have done a little bit of checking about where does the human image with 2 wings come from, and I have found it in some pre-Christian art that a group of people called the Etruscans had. They lived in Italy before the time of the Romans. And so it may have been that when the Romans became Christian, they still had this image of a human with 2 wings left over from Etruscan art, and that's how it entered Christian art, because it really doesn't matter how you picture an angel. The pictures are all just to help us. And so that may be where that image came from, but I'm still doing research to see if I can find an older source of that image.
Daniel, thank you very much for your call.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Daniel, you're all right. Let's go. Yes, we can go now to Mara in North Dakota. Mara, are you there with us?
Yes, I am.
And how old are you, Mara?
I am 11.
And is your part of North Dakota cold today?
Yes, it's really cold. The snow is almost up to the top of the roof.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
You get to go play in snow like that. That's cool.
Uh,
Literally.
Yeah.
Mara, what is your question?
How can you better understand how God is out of time?
Well, it is hard to understand because, like we were mentioning earlier in the show, it's hard to imagine things that we haven't seen, and we haven't seen anybody who's outside of time here in this world because we have time here in this world. So it makes it hard to imagine, but we do have some things in this world that make it a little easier to imagine. I don't know if you've seen one of these with your own eyes, Mara, but if you look it up online, you'll be able to find some easily. We have a certain kind of painting that's called a mural, and M-U-R-A-L. And one of the things that murals often do is they tell a story through the course of the painting. So you look at, say, the left side of the painting, and it has the beginning of the story. And you look at the middle of the painting, and it has the middle of the story. And then you look at the right side of the painting, and it has the end of the story. And there are all kinds of different murals that you find. If you go to the Vatican, and you go to the Sistine Chapel where they elect the Pope, whenever they elect a Pope, there are pictures on the walls that will show gospel stories where they'll have Jesus and the disciples standing at several different places in the picture to show the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story from the Gospels. And so we've had murals for a long time, and murals help us to understand what it's like for God to be outside of time, because since he's outside of time, he sees all of history at once, as if he were standing in front of a mural. So he sees the beginning of history at the same time he sees the middle of history, at the same time he sees the end of history. And it's kind of like one of us looking at a mural and seeing the beginning, the middle, and the end of a story all at once when we look at the mural. And that's kind of what it's like for God to see all of history at once.
How's that, Mara?
That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Mara. Appreciate the call. Let us go now to Wesley. Are you there with us, Wesley?
Here you are. You there?
Hi, Wesley.
Yeah. How does God make the world?
Wesley wants to know, how does God make the world? Wesley, can I ask you how old you are?
5.
You're 5. Okay. Well, thank you for your call, Wesley. How does God make the world?
God makes the world using his powers. God, we as human beings have certain powers. We have the power to eat, we have the power to run, we have the power to lift things. And so we as human beings have certain powers. But God, because he's infinite, he doesn't have any limits. That's what infinite means, is no limits. God has all powers. He's all powerful. And the fancy word for that, if you want to sound precocious, is not supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, but omnipotent. God is omnipotent. That means he has all powers. And one of his powers is the power to make something out of nothing. And that's how he began the world. He made something out of nothing. And then he has the power to shape that thing that he made. And that's what he then did. He shaped the world over the course of its history. And so God made the world using his powers, including his power to make something out of nothing, and his power to then shape what he made, just like a potter can shape clay. Or you might, Wesley, shape something out of clay at preschool or something like that.
Wesley, so God made the world using his powers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right,
I had
Wesley.
another question.
What's your other question, Wesley?
But how was God born?
Well, God, as we mentioned earlier, is outside of time, and so that means he doesn't have a beginning, and he was never born except when he was born as Jesus. But he already existed before he was born as Jesus, and he's always existed. So there was never a time when God didn't exist. He's always been there. And so in his divine form as God, he never was born. He's just always existed. He then was born in human form as Jesus, and so he was already God, but then he took on a human nature, kind of like we put on a coat or something like that. He put on human nature and was born as a human being, and that's also because of his powers. Since he has all powers, he has the power to be born as a human if he chooses, and he did because he loves us.
Wesley, thank you very, very much for your call and for your questions. I hope you've seen Mary Poppins, so you can get the supercalifragilistic reference. Up next is Emmanuel in Texas. Did I get that right, Emmanuel? Hello?
Hello?
Are you Emmanuel in Texas?
Yes,
And how old are you, Emmanuel?
I'm 13.
And what is your question for Mr. Aiken?
My question is, how do I explain to my friends at school that we didn't evolve from like a non-living thing? Like the teacher is teaching us, but I don't have any good evidence, so I wanted to know if you had any.
Thank you.
Well, it's a very interesting question, and you're a little older, so I'm gonna tell you a fancy word for the kind of question you're considering. You're asking about something that is called abiogenesis. Genesis means beginning, bio means life, and means not.
Okay.
So the question is, of abiogenesis is how could something living begin from something that was not living? And this is a question that scientists have really thought about. And some scientists have said, you know, the odds, living things, even single cells, are so complex that the odds of a living cell coming from non-living things just randomly is just teeny tiny, vanishingly small. Some have even argued it's such a small chance that you could just randomly have something come from non-living matter that it's so improbable it would not happen in the whole history of the universe. The universe isn't big enough and hasn't been around long enough for that to happen. And so some people have said, well, the fact we are here, and even the Bible says, you know, it depicts Adam as having been, made from the dust of the ground. Now,
right.
That's probably a symbol, but even the Bible depicts Adam being made from non-living things.
Oh, yeah.
So there's
that's
not a
good point.
problem saying that God originally made non-living things and then he produced us from them. So some people have said because the odds of abiogenesis happening are so teeny tiny, that gives us good reason to think there's a God who made it happen.
Yeah.
Other people, even if they think that you could have it happen just by random causes in a universe of our size and age, other people have said, well, even if it could happen in our universe, you still have to explain where the universe comes from. And so you still need a creator, and then any creation of life from non-living things, even if it happened according to the laws that the creator set up in the universe, it still points to there being a creator. And so the fact that we exist at all points to the existence of God, because you wouldn't have had a universe without God, and you wouldn't have had non-living matter without God, and you wouldn't have had life come from non-living matter without God, even if it was just him who set up the laws that enabled that to happen.
How's that, Emmanuel?
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. And feel free to play that back if you need to listen to that again, because it's kind of a complex thought.
And you can play it back by going to our website, Catholic.com, clicking on radio. You'll find it there. Also, Nick puts in show notes for every show, so you can just look at the show notes and you can click on the one you want, and you will get what you're looking for. I actually am really feeling, and I'm not kidding, I feel like we should do a whole hour just for 13-year-olds. Because at that age, they're facing a lot of really hard questions. And Emmanuel, thank you so much for your call. Jimmy Aiken, thank you for a very fine hour.
Hey, my pleasure, Cy.
My fourth hour with you this week.
Yeah.
That's a good week.
Well, it is, but it also, we're going to have to wait a little while before we get some more time together, because you're going on the cruise next week.
I am, and I'm
have a great time.
Thank you.
And have it. I hope it's very spiritually profitable for you and everyone who goes.
And the next guest is coming with us on that, Carlo Broussard, next hour on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop J. Michael Miller of Vancouver, Canada, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humani Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and, unfortunately, inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Pope Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humani Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humani Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic comes up among friends, family, and coworkers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or by visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Catholic Answers is a media ministry that serves Christ by explaining and defending the Catholic faith. We help Catholics grow in their faith, we bring former Catholics home, and we lead non-Catholics into the fullness of the truth. Our goal is to be the most trusted and accessible source for sharing, explaining, and defending the Catholic faith through as many media as possible, from personal contact to the most innovative means of mass communication. Have questions? We've got answers. Catholic Answers. Visit us today at Catholic.com or call us with your questions at 619-387-7200.
Sharing the gospel with family and friends can be challenging. It's especially hard when they won't even hear you out because of all the mental roadblocks they've built up. This is Carlo Broussard, and in my new book, Prepare the Way, my aim is to help you tackle that essential first step to apologetics and evangelization, getting people to listen with an open mind. Even our best witness can bounce right off folks like these if we don't prepare the way first, breaking down barriers and leaving minds and souls free to encounter the truth. I'll give you evidence and arguments and step-by-step strategies based on asking the right questions to help them overcome their obstacles and make a straight path for the Lord. Order your copy of Prepare the Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
God helps those who help themselves. Preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words. We all hear sayings like these, and we assume they come from the Bible, the saints, or famous Christian writers. Nobody can seem to place their origin, but by sheer repetition, they've acquired a halo of truth. In my new book, What the Saints Never Said, I look at over 40 of these well-known sayings and track them back to their original sources. You'll be surprised at what I found. Some are close to what was really said. Many were misattributed or twisted beyond their original meaning, and more than a few of these sayings were simply made up. I hope by setting the record straight, I can make you aware of the theological errors that can lead us away from the faith and offer you authentic quotes from Scripture, saints, and scholars that will draw you closer to our faith. Get your copy of What the Saints Never Said by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or by asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Just like the saints of the Counter-Reformation, our own souls are in constant need of reform, of reconversion to God and His will for us. We struggle with sin. We become distracted in prayer. We find it hard to be loving and easy to be selfish. In Reform Yourself, Sean McAfee shows you how these magnificent saints can be guides to your own personal transformation. We all need to reform our souls. Let the saints who reformed the church show you how. Order your copy of Reform Yourself today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your happy host. I'm happy because so many people were so very kind to us this week and offered us their support financially and through prayer, and it just means, you know what's great? By the way, Carlo Broussard, our guest this hour. You know what's great during
Hi,
Pledge
Cy.
Drive? Hi. I'm just going to start talking with you without introducing you. So
That's fine, man.
We get so many nice comments. Like, you feel like it's just so beautiful, the things that people will say about Catholic Answers, about what it has meant to them.
Lives are changed for the better.
Yeah, right. And it's like, there was a woman who gave us a donation yesterday, and then I saw the note, and she said she was a militant atheist who started to have an inkling that this Catholic stuff might be true.
Wow.
And listened to Catholic Answers, and
Beautiful.
now she's heading to the RCIA.
Awesome.
So, I know, it's awesome stuff.
Yeah, it is amazing when I go out and speak. Without fail, someone will come up to the table afterward, or
Yeah.
in conversation, and say how Catholic Answers has changed their lives.
Right.
Converting, whether from Protestantism or just nothing at all, and coming
Right.
into the faith. And also, too, they'll tell me how it was helpful for their family member or their friend, etc. So, thanks be to God. By God's grace, we are reaching hearts and minds and capturing them for the Lord. As St. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 10:5, we capture every thought to obey Christ.
Praise God. And it also gives you a sense of the power of the gospel, that it just needs to get a hearing. We need to give it a hearing. Help people, like with your book, Prepare the Way, Overcoming Obstacles to God, the Gospel, and the Church. Did you know that was the title? It just get some obstacles out of the way.
Sure.
You know, and for a lot of people that will help.
Well, and that's the beauty of particularly Catholic radio, because you're able to get that message out there, the gospel message, and the individual who's listening in the privacy of their own home or their car is able to begin entering into that dialogue with the Lord.
Amen,
they might
right.
not know it, but with the Lord in
Right.
essence, and be able to begin thinking about these things. And they're not threatened in any way because it's in private. They're driving in their car, and there's sort of this internal dialogue going on. And that's where it starts and the journey begins.
Once you start to see why Catholics believe what we believe,
sure,
then it starts to come together. We should do an hour where we just do the whys of Catholic belief. Just explain why do we, like somebody say, hey, Carlo, why do you believe that marriage is permanent? Or, hey, Carlo, why do you believe that Christ is in the Eucharist? It's the why that gets people there.
Maybe we ought to do that this hour.
Okay,
son.
Carlo, let's do that this hour. This hour, Carlo Broussard, as I said, is our guest. And as I mentioned, Carlo's book is Prepare the Way, Overcoming Obstacles to God, the Gospel, and the Church. And the topic is the whys of Catholic belief. If there's something you'd just like to know, why do Catholics believe that? Why do they insist on that? Why do they say that? you're welcome to call. 888-318-7884 is the number. That's 888-31-TRUTH. And not only are you welcome to call, we will be delighted to have your call, whether you're Catholic or not. I'm sure there are many Catholics.
Yep.
And actually, myself included, many times. Why? Why do we believe that?
Sure.
Why do we hold that?
Faith seeking understanding. Yeah, we believe
Right.
first, and then we seek to better understand the whys behind the whats. And so that's from the Catholic perspective. But for a non-Catholic who's
Right.
looking from the outside, they may have an honest question and inquiring about a why. Maybe it's a challenge, or maybe it's just an honest inquiry, of
Right.
this is kind of strange to me, and what's the what's the intelligibility of it, what's going on behind this
Right.
And that's why we exist here at Catholic Answers, not only to articulate a what, which is a form of catechesis, right, and echoing forth that which has been handed down from us, from
Right.
Jesus and the apostles, but also to articulate the whys behind it. That why may be based upon divine revelation because Jesus has revealed this to us.
Yep.
And so we have to look at the evidence for that revelation. And then also, too, we can appeal to reason. Sometimes we can appeal to reason to give the why behind what we believe. If it's a mystery of faith that has been divinely revealed to us, well, then we can use reason to answer any sort of objections that arise to that mystery of faith in order to show that the mystery of faith, although above reason, is not contrary to reason. So all of that is involved in the whys behind Catholic belief.
And the number again, 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. I would suggest if you're a person who does not believe in God or doesn't believe we can know for sure that God exists, don't call because that is too easy for Carlo. Carlo would just hit that out of the park so easily. No, that's reverse psychology, Carlo.
Right.
I was doing reverse psychology.
Yeah, it was pretty darn good.
Was it good?
Just a
for a second, you were like, wait, I want those people to call. Anybody can call with any question at all. But that is a basic, I think more and more there's a very basic question. Not why do you believe this about Mary or purgatory, but why do you believe in God?
That's right, and I'm glad you bring that up because we want to be able to extend this hour to questions that concern not only our beliefs that have to do with divine revelation, that which God has revealed to us, those things above reason that we cannot know by reason alone, but we need God to tell us, but also that which we believe to be true, which is within the category of natural truth. Because God not only reveals that which is above reason to us, he also reveals a part of that divine revelation is natural truth as well. Things that are it's possible to come to know by the natural light of human reason. But because, as St. Thomas Aquinas says in the Summa Theologiae, that because it's difficult to arrive at knowledge of those things, and it requires time and leisure, etc., and because we're often, we're fallible human beings and we kind of mess up along the way, that God makes a part of his divine revelation these natural truths as well, so that we can come to know them without the admixture of error and to come to know them easily, in an easier way than if we're just kind of trugging along on our own. So that's the beauty, of the whys of Catholic belief. We can talk about both the natural truths and the supernatural truths.
If you've ever asked yourself, why does the Catholic Church believe that? Why do Catholic people believe that? Or if you're a Catholic, why do we believe that? Today is your opportunity. Today we tackle the whys of Catholic belief with Carlo Broussard. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. We go now to Mike in Albany, New York. Mike, what is your question for Carlo Broussard?
Hello.
Hi, Mike. You're on the air. Your question?
Yeah. Hi, guys. I'm my curiosity is why, if you're claiming that the Catholic Church or you're the true church and whatnot, why would you go from over the span of 5 years in the 40s and 50s, to 35 annulments to now over 50,000 annulments a year? How can that be legitimate?
Thank you, Mike. Carlo.
Well, first of all, I don't know about the numbers, so I can't comment on the numbers that Mike is sharing with us because I haven't done the research on that.
But he's got the trend right.
And he does have, he does have the trend. I mean, he is right in asserting that, there were fewer in the past. There seems to be more now. As to exactly why, I can't give a definitive answer on that. My hunch is that it's just simply the case now, Mike, that many are legitimately failing to enter into a valid marriage where God makes man and woman husband and wife. And that's due to a variety of circumstances and factors that are impeding certain people impeding them from entering into a valid marriage. And it's just, that's the landscape of modern culture and people's lack of understanding of the nature of marriage that they need to be able to consent to. And sometimes their view, their mental framework, and their understanding of marriage is so flawed that which they are consenting to is in reality not marriage as ordained by God. And if that can be determined through the tribunal process where, they're investigating all of this, well, then they have good reason to conclude that God never joined them together as man and woman, and thus they are allowed to enter into valid marriages from then on, right?
Yeah.
To quote-unquote remarry. But so that's what I would say with regard to why there seems to be more annulments or declarations of nullity. Now, it's important for our listeners to know, and it's important for Mike to know, exactly what an annulment is. It's just simply a declaration that this was never a valid union to begin with,
right?
That God never joined man and woman as husband and wife in reality. So there was no real bond existing, right? And so that's why they're free to marry with that declaration of nullity. Now, as to the why, right, of that belief, we have a good indication of this, Sai. Jesus teaches in Matthew chapter 19, when he's given his teaching on divorce and remarriage, he inserts there a clause. If a man puts away his wife and marries another, except for, quote-unquote, unchastity, the Greek word there is porneia. So it's referred to as the porneia clause. If a man puts away his wife and marries another, except for porneia, he commits adultery. Now, many Christians, non-Catholic Christians out there, will interpret that porneia clause as Jesus giving permission to divorce and remarry in the scenario where there's spousal infidelity going on.
Oh, I gotcha.
And if you go and remarry, then it wouldn't be adultery. But upon closer examination, Sai, what we find is that that is not the case, that Jesus is not giving permission to divorce and remarry without being guilty of adultery in cases of spousal infidelity, because the apostles who ask him, or the Pharisees who are approaching him, asking him the question about his position on divorce and remarriage, they already held to a view that spousal infidelity was a condition for permitted divorce and remarry without committing adultery. But Jesus responds in the negative to their question concerning that issue. And then the apostles respond and say, well, if that's the case, well, why should we even get married, right? And then further in the New Testament, that Greek word porneia, both in Acts 15 and in 1 Corinthians 5, is used likely in reference to incestuous relationships. So it's very possible that what Jesus means here is that he's referring to certain relationships that are unlawful to begin with, like incestuous relationships.
Right.
And that makes sense of why Matthew alone would include that, because his Jewish audience would know about the Levitical laws prohibiting incestuous relationships because they are unlawful.
Right. Fair enough. Mike, I hope that was helpful to you. We have to take a quick break, though, so I will just leave it at a hope. 888-318-7884 is the number, and Carlo Broussard is our guest. We're talking about the whys of Catholic faith. If there's something you'd like to know why Catholics believe that, give us a call. Catholic Answers, by the way, is coming to Texas. Come see Catholic Answers speakers at the Fullness of Truth conferences being put on in cooperation with Catholic Answers. On March 29th and 30th, join Tim Staples, Trent Horn, Carlo Broussard at the Prince of Peace Catholic Church in San Antonio, Texas. And on May 10th and 11th, join Tim Staples, Trent Horn, and Carlo Broussard at Good Shepherd Catholic Community in Colleyville, Texas. Nick will have to tell me later if I pronounced Colleyville correctly. You'll leave these conferences on fire for the faith.
It's going to be awesome.
It is going to be. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Have you ever done this before, a Fullness of Truth conference? This is the first
Yes,
partnership we've
yes.
done.
It's the first partnership that we've done together.
Okay.
Between Catholic Answers and Fullness of Truth. But I tell you what, I am a fruit of the ministry of Fullness of Truth and their conferences. I remember the first conference that they had at the Houston Charismatic Center with Scott Hahn, Tim Staples, the late Deacon Alex Jones.
Yeah.
And it was just packed. And I was maybe 18, 19 at the time attending this conference for the first time. And I mean, just the experience that I had there was phenomenal. I had just got into apologetics, and I was just on fire. I was like, it was amazing. And so that was at the beginning of my journey to be an apologist, because I was watching Tim Staples do his thing up there, right?
Yeah.
He was preaching and stuff. And I remember thinking, man, I want to do that. I want to do what he's doing. And so here I am, 17, 18 years later or so.
That is so cool. And there you go. Now you go back and you are doing that thing.
That's right. That's right. And I'm going to get to be at a Fullness of Truth conference with Tim Staples. How about that?
Man, God is good, huh?
Amen.
If you want to go to either of these conferences, March 29th and 30th or May 10th and 11th, just visit fullnessoftruth.org for more information.
Every question is important. Ask yours today on Catholic Answers Live.
Listeners to Catholic Radio, I think, benefit most, at least initially, from what I call remedial catechesis. What Catholic Radio does is it becomes an echo chamber for the teaching authority of the Catholic Church. And what we're doing is teaching many things which have been neglected over the last 40, 50 years. If you listen to Catholic Radio, you know what the Catholic Church teaches.
Al Cresta thinks Catholic Radio is important. So should you.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
The whys of Catholic belief this hour. If you want to know why we Catholics believe what we believe on any particular topic, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Carlo Broussard, our guest, the author of Prepare the Way, Overcoming Obstacles to God, the Gospel, and the Church. Let us go now to Diana in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, watching on YouTube Live. Diana, your question for Carlo.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well.
Carlo, the question I have for you is one that's bugged me for a very, very long time. Okay. How is it that the Catholics or Christians of any stripe believe that the words contained within the Christian Bible are the words of the Christian God?
Yes.
Because I understand that it's been stated that, okay, this God has directed them to write these words down. The big question I have there is, how do you tell the difference between what is being revealed to a man, and then he's telling other people about it, and what's coming out of that man's own head?
Fair enough. All right.
Sure. Yes. Very good question. And what was Diana? Okay, or I just wanted to make sure I was pronouncing that right. Okay, so Diana, you know that this is the key issue. You have hit the nail on the head in asking the question, how in the world do we know that these ancient Christian documents, written by these guys, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, let's just use the Gospels, for example, or even St. Paul's epistles. How do we know that they are the words of God? How do we know that what they put in writing is intended to be put down in writing, nothing more, nothing less, by God? And fundamentally, the answer to this question is because the church that Jesus Christ established has told us so. That's basically the fundamental answer. Now, there's a lot of presuppositions going on there, right, in order to substantiate that. First of all, we have to know, who is Jesus? Well, he's God made flesh, and we have good reason to believe that because he rose from the dead. So what he says goes. Okay, well, Jesus speaks for God because he speaks on behalf of his Father, and he's equal to the Father, so what he says is true. But then we have to ask the question, okay, well, did he appoint any of his members of his community, of the religion that he was establishing within Christianity, to speak on his behalf to his people? Because he would no longer be present with us in visible form. He would ascend into heaven. So did he invest an authority to certain leaders within his community to speak on his behalf? And the answer is yes. That's what we call the 12 apostles. And those 12 apostles instructed other men and ordained them. They're called bishops. And those bishops would ordain other men. And they would continue to transmit that authority that Christ invested to his first leaders, namely the apostles. And what we find, Diana, is that through the centuries of Christianity, eventually, over time, what you had is sort of this growth or organic development of belief among the various Christian local churches about which historical documents written by the apostles and their disciples were inspired by God, that is, having God as their author. But eventually, what happened is it took the constituted official leaders of Christ Church to come together and to make a judgment about which of these historical documents have God as the primary author, rather than just being really great documents that have a lot of truth and written by merely human authors. And this first happened in 393 at the Council of Carthage. It would later be affirmed at the Council of, 393 was the Council of Hippo, 397 was the Council of Carthage, and then even before 393, you had 382 at the Synod of Rome under Pope Damasus, the first then, and then in subsequent gatherings of these church leaders, right? We call them ecumenical councils. Later on, the Council of Florence and then the Council of Trent. You would have reaffirmations of this common Christian belief that these particular historical documents have God as their primary author. And the reason why we can trust this judgment of the Catholic Church, these bishops of the Catholic Church, is because they have historical continuity to those first leaders of the Christian Church who have the authority of God, who have the authority from Jesus Christ to speak on behalf of God. And so fundamentally, we accept these documents that we have in the Christian Bible to be inspired by God because the authoritative officials on this earth who speak on behalf of God have declared them to be so. And we accept their judgment because the Catholic Church has been established for us by Jesus Christ, whom we know to be God made flesh. That's sort of the sketch approach, Diana, and the rationale behind it. What do you think of that?
I want to make sure that I have this right. So am I hearing correctly that, okay, I am to accept the words in the book as the Word of God because the church that was established in the book has declared the book to be the Word of God. In other words, there's that circular reasoning there.
Yeah. Well, here's the key. Whenever we're asking the question, okay, did Jesus Christ establish certain leaders within his Christian community to have his authority and to speak on his behalf? Whenever we're trying to answer that question, we're looking to these documents merely on the historical level. We're not starting out assuming that they are inspired. We're only looking at them as historical documents, and we're going to use various historiographical criteria that historians use in order to determine if what this saying of Jesus is historically reliable or not. We're going to investigate the historicity of these documents. And so just like we would look at any other ancient document and come to conclusions about a particular individual and that particular individual's disciples and what they did and said, so too we look at these Christian documents, establish their historical reliability. Jesus was a real historical person. He had a following. He had some disciples. He appointed certain disciples to be his leaders, and he made promises about these leaders having his authority to govern his church, to guide his community, and to teach his community on his behalf. And then we look to the historical succession of those leaders, men who succeeded those first leaders of the Christian group via history, historical research. And we come to the conclusion that the Catholic Church is that historical Christian church. And then, because we have good historical reason to accept the Catholic Church as the Church of Jesus, who has the authority to speak on behalf of Jesus, well, then we have good reason to accept their judgment that these historical documents are not only historical documents, which we don't need their judgment to accept, right, because we can do that by reason alone, but also that we accept them to be inspired by God. So in no way is there circular reasoning, because we're not starting out assuming what we're trying to prove, that they were inspired. We start out with them as historical documents. We find the Catholic Church to be that original church present in those historical documents. And then we have good reason to accept the Church's judgment that those documents are in fact inspired by God, as opposed to other historical documents that are a part of the Christian community in the early centuries that are not inspired, such as like the Epistle of Barnabas and the Shepherd of Hermas and Clement of Rome, etc.
How's that, Diana?
I'm going to have to go over this more than once on my own time.
Sure,
I'm going to have to re-listen to Mr. Broussard's explanation here. But, okay, it's a start. It's something for me to look at, because this is an extremely important question.
It is indeed, Diana. Thank you very much for the call. And you can call on a Tuesday or Thursday if you need a follow-up, because those are open forum days. We'll be right back with more Karlo Broussard, The Whys of Catholic Belief, on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Author Mark McNeil spent years in the Oneness Pentecostal movement, praying in its lively services, zealously spreading its unconventional teachings, and rejecting mainstream Christianity as misguided. Then he left it all behind. All in the Name is the story of a man who believed he was among an elite group of believers who followed the true faith when so many others had strayed. But an inquisitive mind, careful study, and the action of the Holy Spirit finally led Mark out of Oneness Pentecostalism and into the Catholic Church. This is an inspiring conversion story you won't want to miss. It's a faith strengthener for Catholics and an intriguing challenge to those who deny the doctrine of the Trinity. Order your copy of All in the Name today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Is the Church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Dr. David Anders. Do you have questions about the Catholic faith? Listen for the best of Called to Communion on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern and live on Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Called to Communion on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Carlo Broussard is our guest this hour. And Carlo's book is Prepare the Way, Overcoming Obstacles to God, the Gospel, and the Church. If you know somebody who's got some obstacles that you'd like to help them get out of the way so that they can come to the full communion with Christ and his church, a great book for you. Maybe you are that person. Also a great book for you. Just go to shop.catholic.com to pick up your copy. It's probably wherever they've got good Catholic books. You can probably find it wherever, or ask for it if they don't have it. Prepare the Way, Overcoming Obstacles to God, the Gospel, and the Church.
If it's a place that has good Catholic books, then I guess that implies my book is good, if it's there. I would hope so.
I don't want to just leave it as an implication, Carlo. I will openly come out and say, this is a great Catholic book.
Thank you, Si. You're very kind, man.
This hour, the whys of Catholic belief. Why do Catholics believe the many particular things we believe? We go now to Joseph in Fremont, California, watching on Facebook Live. Joseph, your question for Carlo.
Yes, my question is, first I have to preface it with saying that God is omnipresent. Catholics say that hell is separation from God, so God is not in hell. How can God be omnipresent when he's not present in hell?
All right, very good question, Joseph. Well, we have to first articulate and try to get a proper understanding of what you mean by God is not present in hell. First of all, what is hell? As you articulated, hell is separation from God. Not only just separation from God, but definitive separation from God. But then we have to ask the question, well, what do we mean by separation from God? Do we mean like physically separated from God to where he's over there and I'm over here and thus we're not together? No, that's not the kind of separation that we're talking about as Christians when we talk about hell. Hell is a definitive separation from God, but it's an exclusion from union with God. That is to say, it is a definitive separation from it's a definitive separation from God in that we will forever exist without being united to him and possessing him in a loving union, a union of knowledge and love. We will forever be without the ultimate satisfaction that we naturally desire for as human beings, perfect knowledge and love, which is who God is. So that's what hell is. Now, so in that sense, I mean, God is not in, quote unquote, in hell in the sense that he's not separated from himself, right? Okay? I mean, because hell is to be separated from God. And of course, God can't be separated from himself. But we do say, Joseph, that God is, quote unquote, in hell in that it is by his causal power, it is by his creative power that those damned souls are still existing right here and right now and will exist for all eternity going forward, right? For their everlasting existence. They will be because God sustains them to be, because God is being itself, right? He's the ultimate source of all being. So whatever is has its origin in God inasmuch as it exists. So we can say that God is in, quote unquote, in hell in that he sustains the damned souls in existence. And that is consistent with what we believe about God being omnipresent. That's what we mean. God is everywhere in that all things that are, that exist, have God sustaining them in existence right here, right now, inasmuch as they are being rather than not being, inasmuch as they exist rather than not exist, is due to God's causal activity right here and right now. And it is in that way that we say God is omnipresent. What do you think of that, Joseph?
I think that's a good answer.
Okay, all right. Well, praise God for that.
Joseph, thank you very, very much for that call and for giving Carlo a high grade.
Yeah, it's important to keep in mind, Si, that, when we're talking about God's, God is not God in his divine nature is not restricted to corporeality and spatial location, as if God is going to be over there and not here, or here and not over there, right?
Yeah, right.
So we have to try to break out those boundaries of thinking with our imagination here.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to use the intellect and to conceive that because God is the uncaused cause and, he's purely immaterial, he's not restricted to spatial locations. So he is wherever his power is,
Yeah.
right? So inasmuch as something is and existing, it's because of his causal power. So God is present to this microphone, this computer, this cup, you and me, because he is sustaining us in existence right now, keeping us to be rather than not be. Without such causal power, we would lapse into nothingness. And this is the beauty of even this one truth that we can come to know by the natural light of human reason of God's omnipresence.
Yes.
It ties in to the fact that he is the sustainer of all that is, which gives reason to be grateful.
Right. And because I hate lapsing into nothingness. That's the worst, when you lapse into nothingness. Frederick, in Virginia, listening on the Catholic Answers app. You are next, Frederick. Your question for Carlo Broussard.
Yes, gentlemen, good evening. So I've got kind of an overarching question, and my overarching why, and then a particular why coming from that.
Right.
The overarching why, I guess I accept that it's true, but I've never quite understood why, assuming validly performed baptisms in the name of the Trinity and a marriage between one woman, I've never understood why the Catholic Church recognizes baptisms and marriages from most Protestant churches.
Okay.
That's kind of the overall why.
Okay, well,
the specific why would be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right. I'll try to address that, and then we'll come back to you with your specific why, Frederick. So concerning baptism, so keep in mind this is something that the Lord has revealed to us as the ordinary means by which we enter into the kingdom of God, by which we receive the new life that is necessary in order to exist in the kingdom of God. Now, I'm going to blow your mind here, Frederick, because the church even teaches that you can have a valid baptism performed by a non-Christian or an unbeliever as long as they use water, proper form, and they simply intend to do what the church does. So if you're an atheist, Cy, and we're friends, and we're in a car wreck, and I'm about to die, and I say, Cy, baptize me, man. And we had conversations about what you do in baptism. You take some water, you baptize me in the proper form, and you intend to do what Jesus said to do. I'm going to be validly baptized. And so it extends from that scenario to Protestants, legitimate and validly baptizing with proper form and proper matter and proper intention. And the reason is, Frederick, I think the why behind this is because baptism is the only ordinary means by which we know to receive the new life, because it is such an essential sacrament for receiving God's life in the soul in order to exist in heaven. It's the generous use of it, I guess, is a way we can put it. That's the reason behind the generous use of it, that the Lord would allow this sacrament to be performed by anybody, whether you're ordained or not, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're even Christian or not, because of the necessity, the necessity of baptism in entering into that life with God. Now, concerning marriages, well, first of all, we have to distinguish between a valid marriage and a sacramental marriage within Protestant churches, Frederick. So, whether you're Christian or not, you can still enter into a valid marriage where God, in reality, will create an ontological bond. That's just a highfalutin philosophical term for a real bond to make man and woman, husband and wife. And so you don't have to be a Christian in order to have a valid marriage. Now, if you have two baptized individuals who consent to what marriage is as ordained by God, and they're not Catholic, of course, he's assuming these are Protestants here, and they're not bound by canonical form, right? So I'm talking about two Protestant baptized Christians. Well, that's not only going to be a valid marriage, that's going to be a sacramental marriage. Why? Because these two individuals, on condition that they're validly baptized, are members of the mystical body of Christ. And so their valid marriage is elevated to that of a supernatural nature. So why Protestant marriages, why do we recognize Protestant marriages to be sacramental? Because we recognize those Protestants to be validly baptized.
And Frederick, you wanted to apply that in a particular way?
Yeah, and not surprisingly, I think you've already answered it, but I'll circle back anyway.
Okay.
So the marriages being sacramental stems from the baptisms being valid, and the baptisms being valid is because, I guess, push comes to shove, they can be properly performed by anyone who intends to do it in the proper way. The specific question was going to be, since we as Catholics only have we believe Christ instituted a male-only priesthood, but some of our Protestant brethren ordain females, and those ordinations are not valid. My question was going to be, how can a ordained female minister perform a proper baptism or proper marriage, and would the Church recognize it, and why? The Catholic Church recognize it, and it sounds like the answer is it's not because we are approving of those ordinations, and instead it's overall because
the sacraments
baptisms are valid because. Right.
It can be performed by anybody with proper matter form and simply intending to do what the Church does. Yes. So.
And who's the minister of the sacrament of marriage? Is it spouses or is it the?
Well, in the Western, in the mind of the Church within the West, there's a little nuance in theology here, with regard to the Eastern Church and the Western Church, even within the Catholic Church itself. Yeah. In Eastern theology, you'll find that the priest is the minister of the sacrament, but in the Western Church, within Western theology, you'll find that it's the spouses who administer the sacrament to one another through their exchange of consent. So when you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, I think in its section on marriage, it sort of articulates that nuance there. So that would be the answer to that question.
Frederick, thanks so much for the call. We got to head to a break. We'll be right back with more why questions for Carlo. Why do you Catholics believe? And then you fill in the blank after that. More of that right after this.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Check out EWTN's official YouTube channel.
Just follow the link on our homepage at EWTN.com or go to YouTube.com/EWTN.
Watch EWTN's live shows or today's homily from the Daily Mass.
Click the upload button to see our most recent clips.
You can also find all of EWTN YouTube content by clicking the playlist button.
It's all on the official EWTN YouTube channel at YouTube.com/EWTN.
Visit today.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Carlo Broussard is our guest this hour, and the topic is the whys of Catholic belief. And I don't know what we're doing next. Are we going to?
Well, I would like to just very briefly, for our listeners' sake out there, is to point them in the direction of the 1623, paragraph 1623 in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Before the break, I'd made reference to this nuance between theology in the West and theology in the East concerning the minister of the sacrament. And the way the Catechism puts it, in the Latin tradition, the spouses or ministers of Christ's grace mutually confer upon each other the sacrament of matrimony by expressing their consent. And it says, in the tradition of the Eastern churches, the priests, bishop or presbyters, are witnesses to the mutual consent given by the spouses, but for the validity of the sacrament, their blessing is also necessary.
Okay.
And so I just wanted to refer our listeners out there to 1623 in order to get the precise language of how, from the Catechism itself.
Thank you, Carlo. Let us go to someone from your area there, Carlo, your original stomping grounds. Ricky in Baton Rouge, listening on WPYR. Your question for Carlo.
Hello, gentlemen. Yeah, Carlo, just curious as to how do we define love of God? You know, the love that Jesus mentioned, agape, for love of others, is to desire the best of the others. You know, I can understand how we can appreciate God's gifts and His grace that He gives us, and you know, in doing what He wants us to do, and so forth. But you know, what do the saints say? Are there any good books on, you know, how do we define and know that we're on a path to really love God?
Right, right. No, this is a very insightful question, Ricky. I can't think of, you know, a book or, I mean, just all of the saints. They all have, you know, great writings on their intimate love for God. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, St. Therese of Lisieux. It's just a matter of reading their writings, you know, and how they express that love of God. But you brought up a very interesting question, you know, love being wishing the best for others, right? Love being wishing the good for others. And so how do we apply that to God? Well, think about it like this, Ricky. I mean, when we love God, in a sense, we are wishing His best. We're willing His good in the sense that we love Him insofar as He is goodness itself, right? So we don't love God only because He gives us great lollipops, so to speak, right? He gives us many gifts, right? Of course, the gifts.
He does give us many gifts, though.
That's right. I was about to say,
Okay.
I don't want anybody to think that I'm associating the lollipop, you know, with the gifts of the sacrament and undermining them stuff. The point being is that you don't, you know, somebody gives you a lollipop, you suck on a lollipop, you take the lollipop away. Do you love me or the lollipop? That's the point.
Yeah.
You know, we don't love God only because of the great, tremendous gifts that He gives us, although we do thank Him for that, as Ricky is pointing out here. But also we love Him insofar as He is simply God. We love Him for goodness sake, right?
Yeah.
We love Him because He is pure goodness itself. And so we can apply that definition of willing the good for the other because we're willing His good, namely, He's just pure goodness itself, right? Of course, you know, when we love each other, there's an analogy here, right? Because there's a breakdown. There's going to be a dissimilarity because when I will your good, Si, that implies that you haven't achieved that goodness, right?
There's an insufficiency.
That's right. There's an imperfection. And when we apply it to God, there is no imperfection because there is no good for Him to attain because He is pure goodness itself. But inasmuch as we direct our lives to Him, right, we live for Him, we live in harmony with the plan that, you know, the order of good that He's inscribed within our nature. We live in harmony with what He has revealed to us about how to get to heaven and the things we need to do in order to preserve our relationship with our Lord. Those are all various ways in which we express our love for God.
Does that work for you, Ricky? Or were you looking for something else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I knew that perspective, but I guess I'm looking for whether there was anything more beyond that that's been discussed anywhere. But I guess not.
Well, I mean, there's tons you can say about expressing the love of God. You know, I mean, primarily we express our love for God by following what He tells us to do because only He knows what's going to truly make us happy. Only He knows what's going to bring us into union with Him.
Yeah.
And so following what our Lord teaches us, following the Bible, following what the church teaches us, right? But of course, having frequent reception of the sacraments and the Eucharist and sacrament of reconciliation, all of the various means of grace, both sacramental and non-sacramental. So you have sacramentals, right?
Yeah.
You know, and all of the various things that we do in our Catholic tradition and the prayers and the novenas. And so these are all ways in which we can express our love for God and intensify our love for God.
As you're speaking, I'm thinking of Pope John Paul II instituting Divine Mercy Sunday and having that particular devotion of his to Saint Faustina Kowalska, and the idea there is that what the world needs so desperately is mercy, and the way we express our love for God is by being merciful to others. Are you familiar with Faustina, Ricky? Oh, excuse me, Jim?
Yes.
Ricky, yeah.
So you're familiar with the divine mercy in my soul and that kind of thing?
Right.
Well, you are ahead of us. That's the problem. You're asking for help from people who are behind you.
Yeah, so fundamentally, Ricky, my recommendation is simply to read the lives of the saints. Begin reading the way in which these great saints in our tradition have expressed their love for God. And then you'll get insights on how they express their love for God, and then you'll be able to apply that to your own life as well.
Ricky, thanks very, very much. I want to keep moving. I want to make sure I get to everybody's call here. We're talking about the whys of Catholic belief today. We go now to Jim in Indianapolis, listening on Catholic.com. Jim, what is your why question for Carlo Broussard?
Hello. Thanks for taking my call. My question is, God knows everything, past, present, and future. So is my salvation already determined? Why do my choices and my behaviors matter if God already knows whether I'm going with Him or to the bad place?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Jim. Very insightful question as well. So we have to take a step back and ask the question, well, what do we mean by God knowing our future? And how does He know our future? How does He know past, present, and future? And He does not know our future as future, right? So, for example, if I were to have infallible knowledge, right, that as God, if I had infallible knowledge that Cy will do something tomorrow, he will do X, right? Well, then you would have good reason to conclude that you don't have a choice in the matter. If I knew what you're doing tomorrow as future, like it was my future as well,
right?
We call that a future contingent, right? But as St. Thomas Aquinas points out, and following various other ancient Christian writers, is that God's knowledge of our future is not a knowledge of our future as future, as if it's His future as well, right? As if it hasn't happened yet according to His mind and His view, but He knows our future as present. St. Thomas Aquinas says, in its presentiality, right? So it's this eternal now where all of our choices in any particular time, right, in the timeline, right, it has a particular mode of being at T1 or T2 or T3, but God knows those choices in each distinct particular time to be present before Him right here and right now. So, and that in no way affects, Jim, our free choices, similarly to how I have knowledge infallibly that Cy is sitting right now before me, right?
Yes.
But by no means does it follow from that you're not free to stand up, right?
Yeah.
You're freely choosing to sit right now. You could stand up if you wanted to.
Actually, Darren insists during the show. He insists that I sit here.
So you're free in your act right here and right now,
right.
And I have infallible knowledge of that free act. But the reason why my infallible knowledge does not preclude or exclude your freedom is because my knowledge of your act is in the moment. It's present before me, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, God knows what I'm going to do tomorrow. He knows the choices I'm going to make. He knows my eternal destiny, right?
Mm-hmm.
But He doesn't know it as future. He knows it in its presentiality. He knows it immediately because His single act of, creative act extends throughout all aspects of time, throughout all being, right? And whatever moment of time it is. And because that one creative act extends to all things that are past, present, and future, he knows that which He's causing to be. And so His knowledge of our future is in a present moment, which, like my knowledge of you sitting, doesn't exclude our freedom. And so, Jim, the bottom line is our free choices do ultimately determine where we're going to end up, whether in friendship with Christ or outside of friendship with Christ. But yet, God still has that infallible knowledge of those choices we make because he knows them in the present. He knows them immediately. He knows them in their presentiality, not as future from his view, although they are our future from our perspective.
Jim, does that sit with you all right?
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a lot. I'm trying to remember. I wrote an article in one of the Catholic Answers magazines on this, on God's foreknowledge, but I can't remember exactly which edition it is. But I tell you what, Jim, if you go to Catholic.com, I know all of our past articles
are there.
My past articles are there in electronic form because it was a couple of years back I wrote it. If you go to Catholic.com and type in my name or click my name under the author section for the magazine, and you scroll down, you'll find my article that deals with God's foreknowledge, where I articulate in more detail how God's knowledge of our future is in its presentiality, not as future, and as such, he can have infallible knowledge, but yet, at the same time, we be truly free in the choices that we make.
And don't forget that word, presentiality.
Presentiality. It's
presentiality.
Just in the present, right?
God never, ever heard that word before,
God knows it
Carlo.
as present, not as future.
And now I know it.
In all of its actuality and its ontological being.
I'm just going to let you keep going, Carlo, because the show's over now.
And
but
whatever
you just keep
accidental
going.
mode of existence
I know
it has. My Thomas friends out there, that was for you guys.
Carlo Broussard. Have a nice cruise.
Hey, you too.
Well, thank you
See
very
you tomorrow,
much.
brother. We're going to rock and roll
at the airport. Thank you so much for a special thank you to everybody who supported us this week, whether financially or through your prayers. Jesus Christ is the light of the nations, and we'll see you next time on Catholic Answers Live.